taken. The House is to suspend its sitting for the Standing Finance Committee of the whole House to meet. When the House resumes its sitting, public business will continue with the report of the Standing Finance Committee of the whole House for consideration on the Monetary Policy Statement dated August 2022, supported by the Quarterly Monetary Policy Report, May 2022, Volume 22, Number 4, and the Quarterly Monetary Policy Report, August 2022, Volume 23, Number 1, which were laid on the table of the House of Representatives on December 6, 2022. They should be tabled and taken. That's what's on the agenda. It should be noted, though, that the agenda can be adjusted, with items being added, removed, or replaced. If you are planning to attend a session, here are some rules you should keep in mind. No visitor shall create any act of disorder within the precincts of the House. No photography, videography, or sketching of the proceeding is allowed, unless so authorized by the presiding officer. Visitors who remain within the precincts of the House during a suspension of the session are asked to keep silent, and there should be no smoking inside the Parliamentary building. It's almost time to go to the main event, but before that, let's get the answer to the trivia question we asked. True or false? The Jamaican Constitution was drafted by a bipartisan joint committee of the Jamaican legislature between 1961 and 1962, approved in the United Kingdom and included as the second schedule of the Jamaica Constitution Order in Council 1962 under the West Indies Act 1962. It's true. For your information, the Jamaica Constitution 1962 contains 10 chapters dealing with interpretation and effect, citizenship, fundamental rights and freedoms, the Governor General, executive powers, adjudication, finance, and public service. Now over to the proceedings.
Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Charles, Mr. Green, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terry Long, Miss Smith, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Witter, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown Burke, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Miss Crawford, Miss Daly, Miss Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Miss Hamilton, Miss Hannah, Mr. Henriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Miss Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Miss Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Siblist, Mr. Slowly, Mr. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright.
Want to welcome everyone to the sitting of the House, all parliamentarians, those of us sitting in the House, those in the gallery, those joining us online by the various social media platforms. Today is a special tense day as it represents some finals for a number of teams and persons in here who have particular affections for one team or the other, so we will move hastily along. Statements by ministers.
Madam Speaker, there is intended to be one statement today by the member from St. Catherine West Central and Minister of Health and Wellness. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thanks to my colleagues. And in my years of giving statements in this House, I believe today will represent the statement that is least listened to based on the other more important national events that are taking place at this point in time. So I trust that my opposition opponent will ask very minimal questions to facilitate the hasty departure. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to update this Honourable House on three important changes to the national programs administered by the National Health Fund, an agency of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. The changes, Madam Speaker, are subsidy increases. Secondly, the addition of the prostate-specific antigen or PSA test to the NHF card program, that's prostate testing. And thirdly, an increase to the JDIP drug list, that's a drug for the elderly program. Madam Speaker, these changes will help to support access to health care for some 350,000 active beneficiaries of the National Health Fund card and more than 21,000 beneficiaries of the drug for the elderly program card. So almost 370,000 Jamaicans will qualify under this new arrangement. At the same time, Jamaican men, Madam Speaker, an important part of our health profile, Jamaican men over 40 years of age who are enrolled with the NHF card will now have ready access to screening for what is the leading cause of cancer-related deaths in our male population, prostate cancer to be specific. Madam Speaker, as a reminder to this Honourable House, the National Health Fund Individual Benefits Program provides subsidies for three main categories of benefits for Jamaican residents enrolled. These are subsidies for medication for the treatment of 17 chronic diseases, medical supplies and devices for diabetes and asthma, and for 2 diagnostic tests. These subsidies, Madam Speaker, colleagues, are accessed using the National Health Fund card and through the Jamaica Drug for the Elderly program, JISTV. Madam Speaker, for the 2021-2022 fiscal year, the total enrollment on the individual benefits grew by some 4%, ending the year with 720,272 enrollees on the NHF card program and with approximately 350,000 active beneficiaries on this particular new announcement. Madam Speaker, over 4.3 million claims were approved, totaling some $6.41 billion in subsidy payments over the past year. It's important, Madam Speaker, because what it means is that Jamaicans are benefiting when they are unfortunately ill from the critical NHF subsidy program. 5 conditions by way of data, which is instructive or should be instructive to all of us, represents 78% of the total NHF card subsidy payments, with diabetes representing some 30% of the total subsidy, followed by hypertension, 24%, high cholesterol, 11.3%, and prostate cancer, 7%, and glaucoma, some 6%. In some instances, of course, these are related because if you have diabetes, it will impact your vision, etc., etc. So it's critical to see it as a sort of holistic response. Madam Speaker, As a reminder to this Honourable House, the National Health Fund Individual Benefits Program provides subsidy for 3 main categories enrolled. These are for the 17, I think I'm repeating myself, so let me go on to page 3. Madam Speaker, the NHF card program recorded an average subsidy rate of some 43%. Prostate cancer accounting for the highest, subsidy per claim, some $24,282, followed by lupus, $17,301, and breast cancer, $12,263. In terms of the new benefits, Madam Speaker, in keeping with the NHF's strategic priority to improve access and enhance customer satisfaction, the fund conducts periodic reviews of the benefits under the program, and in addition receives feedback from beneficiaries and stakeholders in relation to their concerns about the program. For the Board of Management meeting held on November 23, 2022, the directors approved the following changes to the individual benefits program. In terms of the NHF card, Madam Speaker, the card will now see an additional 41 new active pharmaceutical ingredients, or APIs, for the treatment of 8 conditions, namely hypertension, heart disease, vascular disease, diabetes, psychosis, glaucoma, sickle cell disease, and epilepsy. So 41 different medicines, if you will, to be simplistic for better understanding, to treat with these various ailments, will be added to the list. Madam Speaker, a very large part of the population. And we are estimating, or certainly the board is estimating, the board and the management, that this will cost an additional 474 million Jamaican dollars per annum in order to make provision for these additional drugs. In terms of the drug for the elderly program, JISTV, the board has also approved changes to ensure that 5 pharmaceutical items are added for the treatment of 5 conditions: arthritis, asthma, glaucoma, hypertension, and vascular disease, based on some specific criteria. This will see approximately 21,100 active beneficiaries receiving benefits at an estimated cost of some $42.59 million per annum. Jamaican residents 60 years and older, Madam Speaker, just by way of information, can qualify for benefits under the Drug for the Elderly program. In terms of the prostate cancer or prostate-specific antigen test, Madam Speaker, prostate cancer is a very serious men's health issue, being the most commonly diagnosed cancer in Jamaican men, and the leading cause of cancer-related deaths in our male population. Let me repeat that. Prostate cancer, obviously a man's disease, a male's disease, is the most commonly diagnosed cancer in Jamaican men and the leading cause of cancer-related deaths in our men. For women, it is breast cancer. For men, it is prostate cancer. More often than not, Madam Speaker, the reason why persons die from prostate cancer, or men, is because of late detection, because they do not get screening. And that applies to a number of the other cancer-related illnesses. And so part of the challenge, or the way forward, is to encourage early detection through screening. Hence, this new addition to the NHF arrangement. So screening is really about early detection, and early detection saves lives. Screening for prostate cancer using the prostate-specific antigen test and the digital rectal examination, or DRE, can identify abnormalities and may find cancer early so that affected men can begin treatment before it spreads. Global Cancer Observatory data for 2020 estimates that Jamaica sees, on average, around 1,500 new prostate cancer cases annually Madam Speaker. I am pleased to announce that the PSA test, the prostate-specific antigen test, will now be covered under the Individual Benefits Program. Madam Speaker, males over 40 years who are enrolled on the NHF card program can now access PSA tests. And this is very important that we encourage our men over 40 to get tested. In other words, it is taken care of if you are registered under the NHF card. And yes, I see my colleague here who is an experienced legislator and a good Jamaican, making a comment which yes, a good Jamaican, this gentleman right here is a good Jamaican, even though he supports one side and I support another in the World Cup. But, Madam Speaker, we know in public health and in health generally that our men sometimes are hesitant to go and get screened because of the way in which screening is done. And we would like to encourage and to say to our Jamaican men, those over 40 who can now access this benefit, that it is better to feel, and I say feel, violated and get tested than to determine that you are infected by prostate cancer at a stage where there is no recovery. And I say that very clear, very straightforward, and using the language that may cause some to chuckle or some to be offended, but hopefully making the important point, Madam Speaker. Get yourself tested. It may save your life. Madam Speaker, we have the subsidy on the PSA test is set at $1,600 per test with a maximum allowance of 1 test per year, which is what you really need. Madam Speaker, we have some 89,665 active male claimants, 40 years and older, who can benefit from this new addition. And again, we say to these men, use the benefit to get tested. Early detection saves lives. To access these expanded benefits, Madam Speaker, and others, members of the public can call the NHF at 1-888 dial NHF or 1-888-342-5643. Visit the NHF's website at www.nhf.org.jm or visit any of the 106 drug serve locations for full-time and scheduled services at private and public health facilities island-wide. There are enough outlets for persons to get information and to access these benefits. In closing, Madam Speaker, I would like to take the opportunity to thank the Board of Directors, Acting Chair, Mr. Shane Dallin, and the other board members, the management led by Mr. Everton Anderson, and staff of the National Health Fund, who continue their exemplary work by staying true to the fund's mission of providing funding for specific healthcare benefits, health promotion, health projects, and pharmacy services in a sustainably efficient and customer-centric environment. Madam Speaker, in the spirit of the season, I would like to take the opportunity to express my sincere best wishes for the holiday season, a season I hope that will be filled with joy, hope, good health and wellness, and love, and reflection for a healthier environment in the new year. Let us be safe on the roads, Madam Speaker. We are seeing too much carnage, too much death, and a lot of it avoidable. And let us take care of each other as we look toward the promise of a new year filled, Madam Speaker, with peace and prosperity. I thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're not listening to the match? It hasn't started?
Yes, but Madam Speaker, but it would be remiss of me as a practitioner not to comment on this. Thank you much, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the Minister for the announcement he has made. Certainly, this will go a far way in helping the vast majority of Jamaicans who, despite getting the subsidy on the National Health Fund as well as the JISTV, still find it a challenge to access their medications. Madam Speaker, just a few points I'd like to make. Minister, you mentioned in your statement about in accessing particularly the PSA, that they can visit the drug-served pharmacies. But what arrangements have been made with the private laboratories for these so that they can be accessed there? In fact, this is where the vast majority of PSA testing is done, because you know that within the government sector, the number of tests for PSA done is somewhat limited. Secondly, Minister, when will this come into being? All these three benefits that you have indicated just now. Thirdly, I see where you have indicated that under the program that under JISTV, that you have benefits for arthritis, psychosis, hypertension, and a list of others. Minister, in light of the concern that you yourself, and we all know that exists currently, where because of COVID and because of other factors, the whole issue of anxiety has increased tremendously within the population, whether you might not have the board reconsider and have anxiety added as one of those conditions which can get a subsidy on the National Health Fund. Depression and other psychosis are, but I mean anxiety, which is on the increase, probably ought to be there as well. Minister, I have a little concern about this, and I'll tell you why. We ought not, in as much as we should be, concerned about management of prostate cancer and prevent it from spreading. However, we should also be concerned about the possibility of an individual developing it. And that is why screening after the age of 40 is critical. Some jurisdictions have gone on a little further, but 40, fine. But you have to be, based on your statement, one of the beneficiaries under the National Health Fund to benefit from this subsidy on the PSA testing. What about those vast numbers of Jamaicans out there who are over the age of 40, not an NHF beneficiary, who would and will develop prostate cancer if they are not done the screening on a yearly basis? Would not the ministry consider, the NHF consider, having those persons, once you reach the age of 40, to register for an individual benefit so that each year you can get a subsidy on doing your PSA? And the final point, Minister, is in light of the concerns that you expressed in your sectoral presentation early this year about the funding for the National Health Fund, how will this new dispensation affect the financing for the National Health Fund in light of the fact that the pressure on it from diabetes, hypertension, and the NCDs is putting the fund under some amount of strain? What impact will this have on the bottom line of the fund and the survivability of the National Health Fund? Oh, Minister, before, there's one other point. Minister, there is a matter that there is some serious anomaly and discrepancy within the system. And you mentioned PSA and prostate cancer. In the private sector, patients access Zoladex, which is one of the treatment. Every 3 months they get that for prostate cancer injection. And after paying the subsidy, it's between $40,000 to $60,000 for the injection. But I can go down to, anybody can go down to the drugstore pharmacy and pay between $5,000 and $8,000 for the same injection. We're not fighting against private sector because I won't say, but I know. But the truth is, can we have some form of narrowing of that gap? Because the truth is that a lot of persons within rural areas don't necessarily have access to a drugstore pharmacy. And you cannot get that at one of the health centers unless you have a GOJ prescription to take it there. So in as much as we can cater for persons who can afford it, there are some who might not be able because of transportation costs and other logistics features why they might not be able to get to that local to access it. Can you tell us if there are any plans to sort of narrow the gap in terms of the costing for that? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my colleague. So in terms of the first question about when, we're looking at end of January, sometime in February. So hopefully by the end of February of next year, the new additions will take effect. In terms of the coordination with private labs, yes, there is an intention by the NHF to coordinate so that the distribution outlet to public-private partnership, as you know, in several areas. So this would be normal for us, including drug-served windows. And in terms of the drug for mental health, psychosis is captured as part of the solution, the drugs that are being offered. I will check to find out if anxiety specifically. But I do agree with you that mental health is a big issue. In the post-COVID era, it's even a bigger issue. And therefore, we should capture that as part of the health profile response. On the issues of funding and so on. Now, you're correct. We did say that the trajectory of the demands on the National Health Fund suggests a reforming of the financing arrangements. That has to happen in the medium to longer term. That's a conversation that has to take place within the circles of government and other stakeholders, the Ministry of Finance and so on. There is a willingness to have that conversation. If you note in the supplementary, the NHF has been bolstered with some additional funding. But as of now, there is no issue in addressing those concerns. So we have to still live true to our mandate. The medium to longer term will require another conversation, and that conversation is taking place. On the issue of the private entities or persons who are not registered. Now bear in mind that part of the NHF's mandate, as is the case of the ministry, is to promote healthy lifestyle, but to promote also the opportunity to access the NHF benefits. So it's not a difficult task if one isn't registered to get registered. I don't know of any government that is progressive and over time sustainably successful that attempts to overly control how the market works. They intervene where necessary and possible to keep the market, should I say, honest with their respective interventions and the overarching policy programs. In this instance, the NHF is there to provide a solution to those who can't afford. But at the same time, pharmaceutical companies and distributors are many and are there to allow competition to lower prices. We should say, though, that the NHF does subsidize heavily these drugs that are very expensive, oftentimes not prices set by the local entities. So as I said in my statement, benefits on the NHF card go as far as 40-odd%. So you're literally getting almost half of the cost, and in some instances free, as you know. So I think the government is doing a lot to give support, but I do agree with you that the health profile and the direction in which it is going does create a sustainability issue, which is going to require some fundamental adjustments as we move forward. And we will work towards that. And then the final thing I'll say in terms of access in rural areas. Remember now, we had introduced the drug-served windows in private pharmacies. And that has expanded to a large extent where persons can access drugs under the NHF program. And that was deliberately done to fill the gaps that existed in the public entities and where they were located in order to address access by those consumers who may have been out of the sort of reach of where those entities are. So the private drug-served windows are in fact working, and The evidence of that is in the data, where the first year that they were introduced, the prescription, the beneficiaries had increased from 1 million to 2 million. In other words, a lot more prescriptions were filled within the NHF, of course, at a fairly high increase in cost. So it is working, but we're willing to tweak it as we go along. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, there's one question that is unanswered. You're past 48, but those who are just around 40, the question I asked Minister was, as it relates to trying to prevent prostate cancer and to catch in the early stages, those persons who are not beneficiaries, because to be a beneficiary, you have to put a diagnosis on the card. Now, persons you don't have a diagnosis for screening. So is there a system in place for those persons who are over the age of 40 who do not have one of those conditions that you get subsidy from National Health Fund to be able to access this PSA subsidy, which is 1,000 plus per test, right? Is there a program in place for those persons to be able to register with the National Health Fund so that they can access that benefit? No, Minister. You cannot register without having a diagnosis because you only capture 17, I think, diseases. If you are outside of that ban, how do you access this benefit? Minister, you...
The fact is that the extent to which someone is
One love who?
or assessed.
Philip, one love who? 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 Oh.
And make the necessary recommendation. I'm not sure if there's a need for another layer of access, but I will certainly speak to the NHF and we can have a conversation with it. But I would believe that the most important recommendation would be a recommendation from your medical practitioner, and they normally don't just recommend based on a conclusion on your health status, but your vulnerabilities based on what is happening to your body at a particular point in time.
Minister, I defer where prostate cancer is concerned. I can understand if you come in and you're excessively thirsty, pass a lot of urine, they will send you to do a test to determine whether you're diabetic or not. The fact is that we don't know, as practitioners, who will develop prostate cancer. You have a high probability if you have a family history of it. But the truth is that the aim is to prevent it developing in persons. Hence, the screening for every male over 40 to have it annual PSA testing done. My point is that in the public health sector, as I said in my opening statement, which you did not hear apparently, that to get a PSA done in the public sector is very, very difficult. It takes a long time to get, and very few health centers. Check the data as you like to look at. How many persons in the public health sector get a PSA done at the health center and get back the result or even get one tested? So I'm just saying that it would help if the National Health Fund could find a way to have these persons registered once they reach the age of 40 so that they can access this free or the subsidized PSA on a yearly basis.
Madam Speaker, I am prepared to concede. Since I am not a clinician, I will have to take advice on the matter. My member to my opposite is a clinician, and in this instance, and maybe only this instance, I am prepared to say his advice may actually be a better position than what I have just postured. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll follow up on it.
Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following: the Public Debt Management Payment Guarantee Central Wastewater Treatment Company Approval Resolution 2022 under the Public Debt Management Act. The Ministry Paper number 103 of 2022 entitled the Government Guarantee of a Loan in the amount of $1,542,420,000 from Sagicor Bank Jamaica Limited to the Central Wastewater Treatment Company. The Jamaica Gazette Supplement, Proclamations, Rules and Regulations, number 2575, volume 145, dated Tuesday, December 6, 2022, number 297, proclamation number 17 of 2022. The Jamaica Gazette Supplement, Proclamations, Rule and Regulation, 2579, volume 145, dated Tuesday, December 6, 2022, number 298, proclamation number 18 of 2022. The Jamaica Gazette Supplement, Proclamations, Rules and Regulations, volume 145, dated December 6, 2022, number 299 and 300 respectively, for number 415 and 416 respectively, in respect of the emergency powers parishes of St. Anne, Clarendon, St. Catherine, and specified areas in the parish of Kingston and St. Andrew, Regulations 2022, and the emergency powers parishes of St. James, Westmoreland, and Hanover, number 2 Regulations 2022, respectively, under the Emergency Powers Act.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally.
Madam Speaker, permission to speak from a seat other than my own. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following resolution. The Public Debt Management Act, the Public Debt Management Payment Guarantee Central Wastewater Treatment Company Approval Resolution 2022. Whereas Section 17(1)(a) of the Public Debt Management Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides that the Minister may, with the prior approval of the House of Representatives, guarantee the payment of the whole part or part of the principal monies and interest and the payment of any other amounts payable under or upon any loan raised by the public body. And whereas the Minister hereby seeks the approval of the House of Representatives for the issue of a government guarantee in respect of a loan in the amount of $1,542,420,000 from Sagicor Bank Jamaica Limited to the Central Wastewater Treatment Company, and any cost, outstanding interest, late interest and fees as may be due and payable. And whereas Section 17(3)(b) of the Act requires the proposal for the guarantee to be brought to the House of Representatives, accompanied by a statement setting out a. the details of a risk assessment exercise undertaken with respect to the issue of the guarantee and a determination as to the level of the risk involved, and B, the total amount of all principal monies and remaining unpaid in respect of all other loans previously so guaranteed, which proposal and statement are attached hereto. And whereas pursuant to Section 17(3)(c) of the Act, the Financial Secretary has certified that the guarantee is consistent with the fiscal targets for total debt specified in Section 48(c)(1)(b) of the Financial Administration and Audit Act, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as a Public Debt Management Payment Guarantee Central Wastewater Treatment Company Approval Resolution 2022. And 2, the aforementioned guarantee is hereby approved. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I'll move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Questions and answers to questions. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions for relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
Madam Speaker, on the matter of public business today, the Minister of Finance will ask for the approval of the resolution notice of which he gave earlier and the continuation of the motion on the caucus of women parliamentarians will be led. And I expect that the member from St. Catherine Eastern will contribute, and yes, Madam Speaker, and the debate will then be closed. May it please you.
Just before we begin public business, it would be remiss of me not to welcome, as usual, to the sitting of the House, our former Senator, Senator Blake Hanna, who I know is here particularly for the continuation of the debate relating to the caucus. So welcome, always happy to have you, Madam. Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Go ahead, Minister.
Madam Speaker, this is a routine matter. It's the renewal of a guarantee in favour of the financial institutions that provide credit to the Central Wastewater Treatment Company. That guarantee expires on the 21st of December, and for that financing to continue, the guarantee needs to be renewed. And the Financial Administration and Audit Act requires that a resolution in this House is passed, giving approval for the government to issue that guarantee. Madam Speaker, this does not negatively affect the quantum of debt outstanding, and as I understand it, does not affect the quantum of guarantees outstanding. So, Madam Speaker, I ask that it be approved.
Those in favour? Those against? The motion has been approved.
Madam Speaker, at this time, we will continue the debate on the motion for the bicameral Women's Caucus.
From St. Catherine Eastern.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is a privilege for me to make a contribution to this very relevant and important debate and piece of legislation. This piece of legislation is so necessary, Madam Speaker, for the way we function as female parliamentarians. Madam Speaker, we can never exhaust the reasons why, as females, it is important to make sure that no matter what side of the aisles we have similar causes, especially causes that will improve the lives of women and children. Our Nobel Peace Prize winner, Malala Yousafzai, only hope I pronounce it right, says, "I raise my voice not so I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. We cannot succeed when half of us are held back." Madam Speaker, end of quote. Madam Speaker, I also want to reassure our male counterparts that we are not here to take over or to dominate. We just want to be included at the table during discussions when decisions are being made, especially those that relate to women and children. Madam Speaker, for too long, females were not allowed to be part of the planning and decision-making process. For many years, women were seen as tokens, Madam Speaker, or just to fill a quota instead of looking at our values and our worth. While we have come a long way, Madam Speaker, time comes to have the right to right the wrongs of the past and ensure that we have equal place at the table. Let me be clear, Madam Speaker. We are not blaming the men in this House for the imbalance. We know that it is how the system is set up. But it is time to change the system. It is time for action. Our voices must be heard. And Madam Speaker, the only way we can make a change is by speaking out and uniting as women. Even though I'm very happy to hear I tell you, he's a real man. Even though the males love and care, listen to this, Mackenzie, for us, they will never understand fully all the issues that we face as women. Madam Speaker, time comes for us to truly lobby together and to ensure that we are fully represented. This is why I am in full support of the motion tabled by Minister Grange for the establishment of a Parliamentary Women Caucus. We believe it is high time that a group with such an important role is established in this Parliament. This formation of this group will help to unite, Madam Speaker, the women on both sides in the House and the Senate to work together for the same common cause. These include, Madam Speaker, development of women, promoting women's economic and political life, improving service provision for women, particularly in education, health care, address cultural and reproductive health issues for women, and advocating for the rights of women and girls. I'm also in agreement with Minister Grange that the government should give budgetary support to programs and services which aims to eradicate violence against our women and girls. While there are facilities, Madam Speaker, but we know to accommodate persons who are abused, but we understand, Madam Speaker, that it is woefully inadequate. I really applaud the Minister for the efforts, but much more needs to be done. Madam Speaker, For many years, women has been making tremendous contribution to social, economic, cultural, and political development of Jamaica. Please allow me to mention a few of these women. The most Honorable Portia Simpson Miller, the first and only female Prime Minister of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, she celebrated her birthday yesterday, and I'm very happy that the People's National Party has established the 12th of December each year as Portia Simpson Miller Day. During her tenure, Madam Speaker, she had created the ME and the entrepreneurship policy, which specially addressed the issues of gender. It was during her time as Prime Minister that Jamaica was recognized by the International Labour Organization for the proportion of women in management roles across the various disciplines in Jamaica. Big up, Sister P. I salute, Madam Speaker, somebody who was my neighbor. Her children came to my school. Enid Maud Bennett, former JLP Member of Parliament and former Cabinet Minister. Not because she attended the same church too with me, Madam Speaker, and we are from the same parish, but come to think of it, Madam Speaker, the first female Prime Minister is also from St. Catherine. Natalie is from St. Catherine as well. St. Catherine has really produced some powerful women. Madam Speaker, Ms. Bennett served as a councillor and a member of Parliament for St. Catherine Central and West and St. Catherine West Central for over 40 years. She was an outstanding representative of the people she served. Ms. Bennett had the people at heart, especially the welfare of the less privileged. She was a humble giant. There are so many other powerful women who have served our country with exception in so many ways. I think of I want to salute our late Queen, the late Louise Bennett Coverley, and Mistress Beverly Manley Duncan, but sometimes we tend to forget, that led the biggest women movement in this Western Hemisphere. They have made outstanding and sterling contributions to the development of women locally and internationally. Madam Speaker, as former First Lady Michelle Obama says, quote, "No country can ever truly flourish if it stifles the potential of its women and deprives itself of the contribution of half of its citizens." So, Madam Speaker, today is a good day. I weathered the storm to come to add my voice and to endorse this very important motion and piece of legislation. God bless you.
Madam Speaker, I rise to add my voice to this motion. As a young woman, well, relatively young woman in Parliament, it is indeed heartening to learn of this motion. Madam Speaker, this motion seeks to make a conscious effort to move the rhetoric to something tangible. For too long, we have always been talking of gender equality. And with this motion, we see it in action. Madam Speaker, the presence and the participation of women in Parliament, as said earlier, seeks to lend support to a great democracy and Parliament. And in the last general election, we saw the emergence of 18 women in Parliament, which represents 30% of the constitution of this Parliament. This is a great achievement. And so it is little wonder that with this achievement, that this motion should readily follow. Madam Speaker, it is not a novel concept to the Jamaican Parliament. In fact, parliaments across the world recognize the value of, and they too have installed women's caucuses as a part of their parliament. This motion shatters the stereotype that women cannot work together, that women cannot put aside political differences to rise to and address common issues. Madam Speaker, it is with this in mind that I, too, encourage all my colleagues, and let me hasten to add, Madam Speaker, that the establishment of a women's caucus does not threaten the existence of our male counterparts. In fact, it seeks to have us working together to ensure that the best interests of the people of Jamaica are served. May it so please you, Madam Speaker.
Minister, House Leader, House Leader, House Leader. Oh.
Madam Speaker, I too rise to support this very important motion. I think all are agreed that it is the right step in the right direction. And we often underestimate the power of bringing all sides together when there is a shared goal, particularly because we practice the politics in a competitive environment. I commend Minister Grange for moving the motion, and it is my expectation that it will enable us to work together constructively on shared goals, even when we may have different perspectives on the path to take to arriving at those goals. And also to say that the issue of gender cannot be looked at properly and adequately by looking only at one gender. And I think it is a testament to an understanding, a deeper understanding of the issue, to see that we are bringing together both sides of the gender divide to address the issues. Madam Speaker, it's really important that we mainstream gender analysis in almost every matter, as we're now being asked to mainstream other kind of issues. The research is clear that the quality of decisions are better when the genders are at the table, and in particular the female gender, only by virtue of the historical exclusion at important decision-making seats. So, Madam Speaker, I simply rise to say I too join in supporting the motion.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to give support to my colleague on both sides who have spoken and those who have not, because I do believe that it takes all of us to have a perspective on whether it's legislation, policy, but certainly the overarching theme of development to make people's lives better, to contribute our perspective. And the gender perspective is an important perspective. And, you know, I have admired the contribution of our women in this parliament. I think oftentimes the perspective is very different from us men, because that perspective comes with a particular context, a particular sensitivity, a particular overview. You know, Madam Speaker, I am happy to contribute and to support, because in a society where our women are by far the most dominant force in terms of the family structure and the development of the family structure. I mean, I speak from personal experience. It was my mother who fathered me in many respects. And if you look at the composition of the family in terms of the makeup and who the dominant figure is, whether there is a man present or not, more often than not, it is the woman who plays the dominant role to provide the guidance and the support. And we can't detach, Madam Speaker, that reality in our wider society from the realities that the individuals or women here in this House have to contribute to policy making and nation building. They too are part of the wider society and are part of that dominant role, that they are part of the critical role that has to be played in developing our communities, families, and society. So
equation that can work, and it's not sustainable. I support the formation of a caucus within the legislature because it gives the women an opportunity to speak among themselves and to the issues that affect them intimately. But I also think it will have one additional benefit. I think that it will some of the rancor and some of the tension that exists across the aisle, I envisage that development will contribute to a deepening of understanding on the various issues, whether they be economic, social, cultural, whatever the issue is. I think that perspective and a joint perspective will help the discussion and the debate. So I support the motion.
If it so pleases you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I too rise to lend my support to the motion as outlined by our Minister of Gender, the Honourable Oliver Babsy-Grange, last week. Madam Speaker, it is important that as a nation, as we look forward towards the Vision 2030 guidelines, Goal 1, Madam Speaker, speaks to creating a fairer, more equal society for all. And in that goal itself, there's a specific subset that speaks to reducing inequalities. Madam Speaker, the formation of this bicameral, that part of the Parliament that focus on both sides of the House, my lady, it certainly goes towards reducing the inequalities at the wider spectrum of society. Madam Speaker, whilst there are many in society who feel that, but why is it that we keep focusing on women and girls when, if you look at the universities, some 70 to 80% of all university students are in fact women. Or if you look at middle management job positions, if you look at judges, lawyers, doctors, teachers, and so forth, their positions occupied largely by women. But at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, the reality is that in the region, not just in Jamaica, but in the region, there's a great inequality that is faced by women, even when they have a greater earning power, simply because, in some instances, because of the physical... Yes, my lady, simply because of sheer brute strength in other areas, that inequality persists as it relates to our women and our girls. And, my lady, there are several issues that certainly the structure of this Parliament will highlight, my lady, and it is important that as a nation, as we move towards the Sustainable Development Goals, as we move towards Vision 2030, it certainly is important that we have this sort of convening in the House, my lady. So I too rise to give support to the notion. And just to add finally, my lady, that perhaps one of the things that these women, that they really should pay special attention to, my lady, is as it relates to the question of parenting. And Dr. Tufton mentioned it as well in his presentation. And my lady, last week we had a youth gender forum. And coming out of that gender forum, what the young people of Jamaica have indicated quite squarely is that we should have parenting sessions tailored at the particular age so that they too understand, even within, let's say, the high school context, what exactly parenting means. Because whilst we do not have a sufficient program geared at in terms of how they navigate sexual relations, etc., my lady, we still have a high rate of teenage pregnancy in Jamaica and across the region, one of the highest regions in the world, my lady. And it is our girls and our women who are left to father both our young kings and our young queens. So, my lady, this is something that can be addressed as well, how we parent. In building stronger families, we will build stronger communities. In building stronger communities, we will build a stronger nation. And certainly that is one aspect that I believe that this foundation can actually look at as well, if it so pleases you.
I am particularly happy and want to congratulate all the men who have got up to support this motion, because in fact they are women folk from the Parliamentary who were here in their visit to me said they wanted to encourage, and they will in fact do so in a tangible way. When invitations are sent for women to join at the meetings, they want to in a tangible way have men come in to support the issue. So indeed it is wonderful, and you know, the member from the opposition said it is a simple truth, and it is a simple truth because we have our only female Prime Minister, that was the Honourable Portia Simpson Miller, and we have the female Minister of Government that manages culture, gender, entertainment and sports. And I say it very openly, she manages them all with composite ease. And I don't know how she manages the portfolio and still manages to look as lovely, and I say so without, as she does. So it is indeed a simple truth, as the member said, and we thank the men for their support, and as women, we look forward to tangible results from this motion. And I now call on.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, Madam Speaker, this is the day that the Lord has made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. Madam Speaker, these are indeed exciting times. As I rise to close the debate, I would first wish to acknowledge former Senator Barbara Blake Hanna, who is here with us. She's here again for the continuation of the debate. And I must tell you, Madam Speaker and colleagues, that Mrs. Blake Hanna was my opposite when we had a Senate that did not have an opposition. We actually had a government and there was no opposition. And an independent Senate was appointed. And Barbara Blake Hanna was one of the independent voices over on that side. And we clashed at times, but we always respected each other's views, and we always disagreed to agree. In the end, we always come to some understanding. And from that time until now, we have maintained contact and we have worked on projects together. And she is an elder, a real Rasta woman, as they call her, an empress. And I really thank her for her guidance at times in the cultural communities. Thank you so much. So, Madam Speaker, today we create history. Today, as the Minister responsible for Gender Affairs, I am pleased to close the debate establishing the first women parliamentary bicameral caucus. Today, we celebrate our bridging the political divide as we establish this bicameral caucus, demonstrating to our women all over Jamaica that women can come together, eliminating all man-made or woman-made obstacles and work together to achieve a common cause. As such, allow me first, Madam Speaker, to recognize and congratulate my sisters from both houses of Parliament on both sides of the political divide for their active contribution to one of those historic moments in the Jamaican Parliament and society. I wish to place on the record of this honorable House my appreciation for the commitment, the solidarity, and the leadership demonstrated by my sisters throughout this process. Madam Speaker, I got full cooperation from both sides of the House. It wasn't just something I wanted to do. It was something that we all wanted to achieve. Madam Speaker, I must also offer full respect to our male counterparts here in Parliament for their support in all causes regarding the welfare of our women. I echoed in the opening of this debate that our achievements for women and children in this country have been done through collaboration with our men. We can't do without our men, and they can't do without us. Madam Speaker, my colleagues from the opposition who contributed to this debate also echoed similar thoughts. Therefore, I want to offer special thanks to the Most Honorable Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition for their leadership and commitment throughout this process we are currently on, and of course, for doing the requisite call to action that challenges their male colleagues to provide the requisite support of us women on this journey at this point. I also want to thank the wide cross-section of Jamaican men who have put their shoulders to the wheel in this great cause. Our women, as women, we value our men. We understand that the greatest potential for peace and stability within our communities resides in a robust partnership with our men as we strive for the common cause of sustainable prosperity for all our people. Women's rights must never be seen as in competition with the rights of our men. We're not in competition. It must be anchored in the promotion of human rights for all. I also must pause to recognize the Bureau of Gender Affairs of my ministry for their dedication to this effort, as they have committed to the wider cause of gender equality. The work they do daily, Madam Speaker, in carrying out the necessary research, executing wide-ranging consultations in the search for solutions, tapping into the intellect of Jamaican women from all walks of life, as well as engaging the global fraternity of institutions involved in women and gender issues, cannot be overstated. And I really want to thank them and to recognize those who are in the gallery with us today. I'm assured that they can be expected to provide the support, the Women's Caucus, as a part of their programmatic life as we go about the nation's business. Madam Speaker, allow me to also recognize the presence here today in this honorable House of a delegation from one of our sister countries of the Caribbean. Madam Speaker, in that phenomenal moment back in 2011, when I was able to provide this honorable House, the Cabinet, and the people of Jamaica with a national policy for gender equality, after a long and consultative process, and followed by exhaustive programs at the national and community levels, little did I know that our work here in Jamaica would be scrutinized and appreciated around the Caribbean. As the Minister of Culture, allow me to say that it is culturally, strategic, and of significance that we welcome to Jamaica today a delegation from our sister government and people of Belize at this particular moment. And they're here in the gallery, and we really welcome them. Their presence in the gallery today is as a result of them being in Jamaica to study our state mechanism as it responds to gender-based violence, gender equality, and the overall upliftment of Jamaican women and children. They're here to study how we do it. We welcome the delegation from Belize to our country and to this honorable house. And we thank our international development partners, including UNFPA and Parliamentary, for making this knowledge exchange possible. Madam Speaker, we are conscious that the challenges continue regarding the place of Jamaican women and children in development. In fact, a team from my ministry is about to go to Belize to do a study tour of their gender-based violence response mechanism, because it's about exchanging best practices and learning from each other. We continue to work with our faith-based organizations, academic institutions, women's rights organizations, think tanks, community-based organizations, ministries, departments, and agencies. The revised national policy for gender equality has been completed and will be introduced to the public in the coming year. Madam Speaker, we are excited at the prospects because of how much we can achieve, because of what we have already been able to achieve together, and how we are going to work together to be a shining example to the rest of the world. In this regard, it would be remiss of me if I didn't use this moment as I close the debate to remind Jamaica that the eradication of gender-based violence is everybody's responsibility. It is about early detection. It is about active camaraderie and support that manifest in proactive responses in which expressions like, if me did know, or me shoulda, or me wish me did, have no place. Do not turn a blind eye. It is about continued orientation and training of security personnel and engagement of church leaders and the wider community on the signs of domestic violence and the possible responses that are likely to mitigate, reduce, or eliminate gender-based violence. And Madam Speaker, as we speak, the amendments to the Domestic Violence Act is now in its final stage and will be taken to Parliament next year, early next year. It is about continuous scrutiny of laws and policies to ensure that women and children are effectively protected. Madam Speaker, every representative in this House accepts that domestic violence and intimate partner violence are a threat to the human development of our society. Likewise, every representative accepts that to fix complex problems such as these, we must have multi-layered responses. Notwithstanding this, there are some parts of our country where citizens may ask, why have a woman's bicameral caucus and not a gender caucus? Because I know it may even be in the minds of some of our men here today. This is indeed a merited question because our position has been that the progress made on women's rights in Jamaica have been done due to the collaboration with our men. I hasten to assure you all that this caucus is a continuation of this culture of partnership. When we just started the discussions on the bicameral caucus, there was a discussion on this being a women's caucus as opposed to a gender caucus. We agreed that while the issues of men are of concern, it is critical for us to first zone in on some unresolved matters concerning women in Jamaica's legislative agenda. We felt it was important to do so. As Gender Minister, I can assure our men that we will be zoning in on issues that impact on you as well. And that treating with issues that impact on our men will be fully integrated, our men and our boys will be fully integrated into our gender agenda. I do understand that we live in a world that tends to emphasize our differences more than our similarities. It is a world that focuses on conflict rather than on cooperation. We, however, as women parliamentarians, are assured that we must focus on connectivity and collaboration without boundaries. Our mantra must be about sister supporting sisters for the sustenance of this society, about sisters supporting brothers, about brothers supporting brothers, and about brothers supporting sisters. It's a partnership. We therefore recommit to the guiding principles in the national policy for gender equality. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Inter-American Convention on the Prevention, Punishment, and Eradication of Violence Against Women, and the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, particularly regarding the issue of enabling gender equality in the Jamaican society. Madam Speaker, when women's needs are centered, all of society is happy. The reverse can be equally true. We honor the cause of collective engagement that this bicameral caucus provides. Madam Speaker, we had a workshop, we had a retreat over the last weekend. Madam Speaker, it was like truth and reconciliation. It was an experience as us as women from both political divides, from the upper and the lower house. What word can I use? Was just to say that we were frank and fearless with each other. We are excited by the prospect of shared responsibility and the collaborative search for solutions that underpins this bicameral caucus. And further, we are assured of success when women, leaders, visionary, and pragmatists come together in a oneness of heart and mind in the interest of our Jamaican women. In the end, a woman is simply a woman, wherever she is, and in what capacity she serves her country. While she searches to build herself, she aims to build everyone around her, and this includes our men. Am I right, ladies? Hers has been the toil, the tears, and the moans that have kept this Jamaican society focused on people's prosperity. Hers has always been a willingness to engage in the hard work of family upbringing, of community building, and of dreams shared, achieved, or deferred. That is what we are about. Hers in all this has never been to give up. We women, we stick with it. As the late Edward Seaga, former Prime Minister, said, women have stick-to-ivity. Stick-to-ivity. We stay focused and we don't give up. And that is why some of our men are so successful. Because we stick with them, we fight with them, we stand beside them, and we will surround them with love. And make them what they are today. And so, Madam Speaker, I just want to indicate that yesterday, Cabinet approved the membership of the Gender Advisory Council. And we will be announcing, not today, but during the course of this week, the members of the council. But just to indicate that the Gender Advisory Council, the GAC, will comprise a cross-section of representatives from ministries, departments, and agencies, from civil society, from the opposition, from various entities like the Parenting Commission. I will chair that council. My alternate chair is Honorable Orlando Terrelong, and I have 2 co-deputy chairs, one a man, one a male, one a female. And on that council is the chairman of the People's National Party, who is also a spokesperson here and a member of Parliament, as well as a number of other prominent women and also rural women who will make up this advisory council. The JCF will also be represented on the council, and we are going, and also there's a great mix of male and female as well as young and old. When I say people with experience, young and those with experience. And so I'm really proud about that council, and that cabinet has given its approval, and we will be able to announce the membership and get the GAC up and running in a matter of weeks. I also want to announce today that working closely with Parliamentary, we will, for the first time, in February of next year, February 21, leading into International Women's Day, we will have the first all-woman sitting of Parliament. All members of Parliament were written to and asked to nominate a young woman between the ages of 18 and 25. Maybe one and two of you did not respond, but we have filled the space. And last weekend, we started the training. And we have some really bright young women, and I'm looking forward to that sitting here on the 21st of February, which has been endorsed by the Speaker and the Clerk of the House and the Leader of Government Business in the House. And that will be quite an interesting and enlightening experience. So as I close, I want to quote the words of Jamaican poet George Campbell in the poem, History Makers. Women childbearers, wistful toil sharers, destiny shapers, history makers, hammers and rocks. We, the women parliamentarians, bicameral caucus, commit to the upliftment and empowerment of our Jamaican women, our children, and our men for the prosperity of Jamaica, land we love. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, sir. At this point, Madam Speaker, I ask for the motion to be approved.
Members, the question before the House is that the motion brought by the Minister be approved. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Your motion has been approved, Madam Minister.
Madam Speaker, just by way of a note, Madam Speaker, to indicate that the level, in fact, of gender balance on this side has been intact and has a history, because we began this great adult suffrage with the first woman on this side of the House, just for the record. And to ensure that we understand also the role that the men have played in enabling this, there's a certain Minister of Youth and Community Development in the 80s that had responsibilities for women's affairs. And that And it was then called Women's Affairs, if you remember. And it is that minister who, at the Nairobi conference, brought through the president of the Senate then, Jeanette Grant-Woodham. In fact, she wasn't president as yet. The resolution for the removal of all discrimination against women. And it was from this side of the House. So our men and women have been working together in tandem for a long time. Madam Speaker, I beg to move for the recommittal of the item statement by ministers to allow the member from St. James, West Central, and Minister of Legal Affairs to make a statement.
Members, the question is that we have the recommittal of the item statements. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Can circulate it. Can circulate it. Yes, the copies are there. Madam Speaker, the purpose of this statement is to correct a misstatement on the law which has misled members of the public on when emergency regulations take effect. A question arose in the public sphere based on statements attributed to two senior members of the legal profession, one of whom is Jamaica's celebrated constitutional law expert, and the other a former Solicitor General, whether the emergency powers, parishes of St. James, Westmoreland, and Hanover No. 2 regulations 2022, and those for the parishes of St. Anne, Clarendon, and St. Catherine, and specified areas in the parishes of Kingston and St. Andrew were valid as at December 6, 2022, when states of public emergency were declared. Madam Speaker, the validity of the regulations was brought into question because it was reportedly said that until and unless, in other words, the regulations were tabled in the Parliament, they were of no legal effect. I should like to advise that the regulations in question were promulgated by the Governor-General pursuant to power to do so granted by Parliament under Section 3 of the Emergency Powers Act. Insofar as is relevant, the law provides, during a period of public emergency, it shall be lawful for the Governor-General, by order, to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community, and those regulations may confer or impose on any government department or any other person a number of powers, Madam Speaker. The law goes on to say that any regulation so made shall be laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time when they are so laid before the Senate or the House of Representatives, whichever shall be later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate or House of Representatives providing for the continuation. Madam Speaker, the regulations do not require any affirmative or negative resolution to commence as some other laws require. The Emergency Powers Act provides for the making of these types of regulations by the Executive, the Governor-General, not the Legislature, Parliament, because the Legislature has delegated that subsidiary lawmaking power to the Executive. And this is a permissible delegation for the stated purposes in circumstances where a state of public emergency or public disaster exists. Madam Speaker, Section 3 of the Emergency Powers Act, and in fact any other act which confers a power to make regulations, must be read in conjunction with Section 31 of the Interpretation Act, which provides all regulations made under any law or other lawful authority and having legislative effect shall be published in the Gazette, and unless it be otherwise provided, shall take effect and come into operation as law on the date of such publication. Madam Speaker, it is most unfortunate that the people of Jamaica have been misled on this very important matter. The requirement to table the regulations speaks to their duration, that is, how long they last. The requirement does not deal with when they commence. And Madam Speaker, the regulations have been tabled in the House today, having previously been tabled in the Senate. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I have read the statement from the Honourable Minister. I must tell you that as an attorney myself, I am a member of this House for quite some time. This is a learning for me. I must admit, until I've seen and read this statement, I was not of that understanding either. And I believe that the fact that this statement had to be made in the context of what has been said by the eminent constitutional lawyer and others, that it speaks to the fact that the clarity is needed. And indeed, I believe it may not end here. I believe it may not end here because there are questions. There will be questions. And let me say why. Because the statements made are generally accepted that regulations are subsidiary legislation, and that in the main act of the law, it provides for the making of these regulations. It is not my understanding previously that all that needs to happen is that it is gazetted and laid on the table unless the legislation so specifically provides. But more than that, it has been the practice, even in respect of this matter, that the regulations have been previously debated and discussed. And discussed. So that even in respect of this matter, there could be and may well have been an expectation that this matter would have been discussed and debated. So I believe that it's going to raise and continue to raise some questions as to whether the Emergency Powers Act are effective without the tabling, and raises the secondary question as to when it commences. So there are some issues there, and I just rise to say that if it turns out that the Honourable Minister is correct, then it's a moment of learning. It's a teaching moment for all of us.
Madam Speaker, it is my understanding that the statement was premised on a misunderstanding. Something happened in the House last week where a number of documents were circulated, and included in the circulation were the regulations. It is not the norm for the regulations to come from the printing office and be sent straight to the floor of the Parliament without being checked for accuracy, among other things to ensure there was no printing error. So we were circulating a number of documents, including the supplementary estimates. So when they were pulled back from circulation, I think there was some misunderstanding that they were tabled and pulled back. And the question which on inquiry, I learned was an error of fact, which caused the misstatement of the law. So the misbelief was that there were no regulations at all because they were withdrawn. It was simply a matter of not circulating them. But you would know, and I think, I'm grateful for your candor, because I realize that a lot of lawyers have said to me they didn't know either. The truth is that the Parliament may delegate its subsidiary lawmaking to any of many persons, primarily to ministers and other authorities. And different laws will specify how the power is to be exercised. Not all of them require that the regulations, and regulations are defined to include order under the Interpretation Act, require further action by the Parliament. So some ministers are permitted to make an order to deal with things. Other entities, including the Bank of Jamaica, the Integrity Commission, they can make regulations by order. Some do require another legislative step of an affirmative or a negative resolution. Some require nothing. But all laws must be gazetted, and they come into effect on the date of the gazette if no other effective commencement date is specified in the law. So I think the confusion was whether the regulations in fact existed. And then many admissions came that they really have never paid attention to the power that is delegated and provided for in the Emergency Powers Act. To respond to the practice of having debates, it is usually because the tabling of the regulations was accompanied by an extension resolution. And it is in that context that the debate took place, because before the Parliament would be a resolution for extension, as is provided for at Section 3 of the Emergency Powers Act. So upon being tabled in the last House, their duration is 7 days until they are continued. And it's usually tabled with a continuance resolution and the debate take place. But it is a learning moment, because matters of public law are not matters that are widely known without expertise. And so I found it most unfortunate and misleading that the impression was being given. And since the authority of the lawyers, many people just ran with it and have been misled. And that is why the statement was extremely important to be made for clarification, Madam Speaker.
And the other point, as to when it commenced, it is your view that it is at the publication of the Gazette. So, just for clarity, could you state then when, in your view and in your interpretation, understanding of the law, did the regulation take effect?
It requires a little wider understanding of what periods of emergency. So, periods of public disaster, public emergency, you may have no Parliament being able to be convened in other circumstances where they are declared. So they are made, and then they have to be gazetted. They can or cannot be gazetted at the same time. When gazetted, the Gazette can state when they become effective. The effective date, if it doesn't state it, they become effective on the date of publication. So it enables a level of flexibility because of what an emergency entails. And it's not just my interpretation, but there is a lot of case law around it. So now it is that they are made, because the regulations set out the powers that have to be exercised. And they are made in writing, and they are given. So they can be effective even though they are not gazetted, but the requirement to gazette them is a requirement of the law. Yes.
For clarity again, just
yes.
When in your mind did these regulations take effect?
These regulations took effect on the day when the state of public emergency was declared, on December 6, 2022. It said so, and they were in fact gazetted on that day. It's just that they were to be checked, then tabled in the Senate, and come to the House for the 7 days after today. Yes. But it does say so on the face of the document here. Tuesday, December 6, 2022, if you look on it. And that is the effective date as at the date when the emergency was declared, the state of emergency declared.
Madam Speaker, it's not intended to do any further business for the day. I just want to use the opportunity to thank those who participated in the bicameral debate, the Women Caucus debate, particularly the men who spoke today. I want to thank them. And so, Madam Speaker, I ask for Parliament to be adjourned at this time until tomorrow, December 14 at 2 p.m. sharp. Tomorrow we will meet and suspend the sitting to take the Bank of Jamaica report. And I'm making a special appeal to members of Parliament to be present here and to be present on time. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker.
The question before the House is that we do adjourn until tomorrow, December 14th at 2 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This House is now adjourned.
Violence against women and girls is a human problem, not just a woman's problem. It's a problem for men too. Gender violence takes many forms, including sexual assault, domestic violence, relationship abuse, sexual harassment, and sexual abuse of children. The magnitude of ongoing violence against women and children in our country